Toyota Camry rear brake job, let's get it. I already have the vehicle lifted up. I put it on jack stands, so we're good there. You know, have the wheel removed and the brake rotor right here. You can see how badly grooved this is. This is not good. Your rotor should be smooth and it should not look like this, but you're gonna find out why mine is like this later on. We're gonna go ahead and continue with this brake job. So the brake caliper right here, behind it, you're gonna have some bolts you want to remove. You got 1, 2, you know, for the caliper body, and behind them you got another 1, 2 for the caliper bracket. So 4 bolts in total, not a lot. We're gonna go and start with the caliper body first. 14mm socket, ratchet, go ahead and take those off. Once those bolts come out, I use a pry bar and pry out the caliper body. On the caliper body, there's a piston. That piston has to be compressed. We're going to go and do that later on, but for now, we're going to look at these brake pads because I was very concerned to find the condition of these, you know, and see how they look. This outer brake pad, we have some problems here. We have nothing left in our brake pad material. This is why my rotor was grooved. But on the other brake pad, there was still some material left. So this had me thinking, okay, something in my brake system was not serviced correctly or is starting to fail. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. I go and check the slider pins. These are on the bracket. So these slider pins, they're called slider pins for a reason. They should move, right? It's just slide back and forth. And so mine were moving. I didn't have too much concern there. I go and look at the brake caliper piston. This piston, when you step on your brake pedal, it pushes out. And then it pushes on the brake pads, and then it stops your vehicle because then it squeezes the rotor. This piston has to move freely as well. If I compress this, it should compress back into its bore without much of a problem. And you see here, I'm using a huge C-clamp. I don't have the proper tools at home. I apologize. Everything is in my toolbox at work. But I needed to make this work. So I use a huge C-clamp with a brake pad to push and compress this piston back into its bore. If it does not compress, then I have a seized caliper and I have to replace the caliper. But this did take a little bit of effort, which was a concern for me because it should not take that much effort, especially with this huge C-clamp. So maybe this caliper is starting to fail on me a little bit. For now, I don't care because I don't know how long I'm going to keep this vehicle. You're going to have to compress this anyways for the new brake pads because they have more life and you need the piston compressed all the way back to put this back on. Now I need to take the 2 bolts out for the caliper bracket. Again, they're 14mm. Go ahead and take those out. And once that comes out, this should just slide off the rotor. So take that off. And now we just have the rotor left. For me, it was very simple. You know, it just came off. It was already loose. For you, it might be harder. So you might have to use a hammer. So anyways, take the rotor off. And now we're going to start the servicing process. This is the most important step in any brake job. You service everything so the new brake pads and rotors are going to last a long time. This is the wheel hub. This is where the rotor sat against. So I'm going to grind this stuff off of it. I'm using a soft disc because the condition of this is pretty good. I don't need to use a hard disc for it. So just grind that, make sure it's nice and smooth. Next, we're going to service the brake caliper bracket, which has the brake shims on it. These brake shims are what the brake pads sit on. They sit on these brake shims. And when I remove these with a flathead screwdriver, just pop them off, underneath I found a lot of rust. Like this rust is taking up space, which is not good. Because now the brake shims sit a little bit higher and the brake pads might sit in there a little bit tight. And I don't want that. I want them to have a little bit of room to move. I go ahead and remove this rust, and now the next step is applying anti-seize to these areas. After you grind this area down to bare metal, you're gonna have to put something on it because it's gonna rust again. So anti-seize is very good to use because it prevents metal on metal corrosion. The brake shims are made of metal, so they're gonna sit on here, which is made of metal, so it's gonna cause corrosion again. Anti-seize, I like using the silver stuff, so just apply that here, and you're good to go. Guys, I'm going to give you a tech tip right here. This has saved me so much time in the past with brake jobs that I've done before, and that's to do a visual inspection of the brake shims. There are a bunch of different manufacturers out there that make parts and make brake parts, and they're going to make these shims a little bit different sometimes. You know, they're not going to look the same as the ones that come off, and sometimes they do look the same. But what you want to do is make sure all the tabs are in the correct spot. You know, sometimes they might not fit that good. You know, it might stick out a little bit, and that's gonna be an issue. Maybe it might contact the rotor, and you're gonna have a squeal, and you're gonna realize that you're gonna have to come back and, you know, look at this stuff later on. But if you want to avoid all that, just make sure everything is properly in place. Next, we're gonna service the brake caliper pins. The slider pins, they need to slide. Like I said, these ones were okay, but you take them out and you remove the old grease off of the pins and you apply new grease. So just use a rag or something to wipe off the old grease from the pins and put new grease on it. I use silicone paste. Some of you guys could even use anti-seize here as well. They both work okay. So just put that on there, a light layer. You don't need a lot. And then when you're putting them back into their bores, I like to pinch the boot so all the excess air inside of it and the old grease gets pushed out, right? So you don't want this to be completely filled with grease. You know, you want them to have a little bit of space to move. And so you just pinch the boot and press them in. All the air comes out as well, so that's good right there. We come back to the wheel hub and apply a little bit of honey glue, which helps to spread the anti-seize a lot easier. And the anti-seize is important here because this is where the rotor sits up against, and that's why it came off easy for me, because we had that anti-seize on here before. And next is to compare the new rotor with the old one and just make sure the size measurements are the same. You know, the rotor diameter should be the same and the holes should match up as well. And if that's all good, then you're good to go. Throw on the rotor. And then go ahead and throw the brake caliper bracket on there and just put in those 2 bolts, fasten that down. When it came to the brake pads, here's the comparison. Obviously a huge difference, but I put a little bit of anti-seize on the part that contacts the shims. I don't want these seizing up on me again, so I'm gonna go and do the extra and above and beyond and throw the anti-seize here as well. Maybe a thin layer. Mine is a lot more than I needed, so whatever. And now all that's left is to put the caliper body back on. We're almost done. And remember when I said you have to compress this all the way back? Well, this is why, because the brake pads have so much more life. You need to have that clearance to put this on, so you have to push the piston back. So if for some reason your piston is not compressed all the way back, you might have a hard time putting this on, so make sure you do that. And then once that's on, those last 2 bolts, throw them in, tighten this down. And pump the brakes. After you're done all this, pump your brakes. Because your piston is compressed all the way back, it is not contacting the brake pads just yet. You pump the brakes, piston comes out a bit, it will touch the brake pads, and that's when you have brakes. So do not even try driving this without pumping the brakes, and then you're good to go. And that's about it. Guys, thank you for making it to the end of the video, and I appreciate everyone that does hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and do that if you want to be a part of Zilla Squad. Guys, I post automotive related videos and other fun stuff that I do, like painting rims. You know, can you stop making noise, Lou? I'm trying to finish this. I do a bunch of other stuff, you know, just the automotive industry. I'm a mechanic, for those who don't know. So I'm still growing this page out. I appreciate you again, and thank you for watching this video. I hope it helped. Lou, I'm going to beat your ass. So yeah, that's about it, man. I'll catch you guys later.